Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Mr. Dr. Medi MSc as my first supervisor and the Honorable Mr. Aditya Pratama SPD MPD as my second supervisor. Let me introduce myself. My name is Nanda Eka Putri from Economic Education 2018 at Jakarta State University. I will present my research entitled Analysis of Factors that Influence Interest in Continuing Their Study to Higher Education at Public SMA, SMK, MA in Cempaka Putih District. I will present topic discussion, and Chapter 1 is Introduction, Chapter 2, Theoretical Review, Chapter 3, Research Methods, Chapter 4, Results and Discussion, and Chapter 5, Closing. This background is every country will need qualified and competent human resources to build a country that is able to compete with other countries. Human resources are state assets that must be maintained in quality. One way to maintain the quality of resources is through quality education, as explained by Law Number RI 20 of 2003 concerning the national education system, that the main function of education is to educate the life of the nation. With the development of the times, higher education has always been a general standard of studying as an achievement that must be obtained to obtain jobs, social status, and others. Higher education can be interpreted by obtaining education in higher education with diploma, bachelor, master, specialist, and doctoral education program. To see how much of the participation of school children in the tertiary education can be seen in the college gross participation rate. And based on the table, the gross participation rate for higher education is only around 25%, which is still below 50%. This indicates that the Indonesian population interest in higher education is still relatively low, and not many are aware of the importance of education. Our next search data for state SMA, SMK, MS students in Cempaka Putih district for the 2020-2021 academic year. Overall, SMA, SMK, MA Negeri students in Cempaka Putih district will choose to continue to college are still low, which is still below 50%, with percentage of 48% of students continuing to college. This indicates that the interest in continuing their study to higher education is still low in SMA, SMK, MA Negeri in Cempaka Putih subdistrict. And the study used the basic theory of person-object theory of interest, or POI, which was first coined by Cecily et al., so that there are several factors that influence interest in continuing study to higher education based on the theory, namely learning motivation, the environment, and the socioeconomic status of parents. However, in this study, the research wants to use learning motivation as an interpreting variable, so that the researcher makes learning motivation as an intermediary variable. That means the independent variable is peer environment and parent socioeconomic status to the dependent variable interest in continuing their study to a higher education. And next is this question. First, use the environment of peers as an influence on the interest in continuing their study to higher education. And two, does the socioeconomic status of parents have an influence on the interest in continuing their study to higher education? And three, does learning motivation have an influence on interest in continuing their study to higher education? And four, does the peer environment have an indirect influence on the interest in continuing their study to higher education through learning motivation? And five, does the socioeconomic status of parents have an indirect influence on the interest in continuing their study to higher education through learning motivation? And next, this is novelty. Research relates to factors affecting interest in continuing their study in higher education has been widely studied in previous studies. as in the research of Nurtanto, Muhammad, Purmasari, and Hayati, Khadija, Munira, Agustina, and Afriana, and Fatima with different research locations. This location is public SMA, SMK, MA in Cempaka Putih district, and subject is class 12 student at public SMA, SMK, MA in the Cempaka Putih district. And data analysis technique is fact analysis. And next, theoretical review. Person-object theory of interest. It was first coined by Cecily et al. In 1983. Based on the person-object theory of interest, interest developed through the interaction of individuals with their environment. I explained that there is a process of interest development that starts from the individual and is then triggered through environmental stimuli. Then there will be situational interest that has been triggered by the environment. After that, situational interest that has settled and this will turn into individual interest. And next term, pro-theoretical. The influence of peer environment on interest in continuing study to higher education. In the theory proposed by Cecil, explains that the growth of interest comes from the interaction of individuals with their environment. The environment provides stimuli that can trigger the emergence of interest in a person. Person of the theory of interest conceptualizes interest as a relational concept, so that it can be interpreted that interest can grow because of a special relationship between a person and the object in his living space. One of the closest environments to student is the peer environment, so researchers use the peer environment as a stimulus that can trigger interest. And research on factors that can influence student interest in continuing their studies to higher education was also carried out by Lassen. The results show that the peer environment had a positive and significant influence on the interest in continuing their study to college. It can be interpreted that in the peer environment, there are many friends who want to continue to college. The higher the interest of students to continue their study to college. And next, parents' socioeconomic status on interest in continuing study to higher education. In accordance with the explanation of the person-object theory of interest from Cecil, that the growth of interest in a person comes from external factors, namely the surrounding environment. The surrounding environment will stimulate student work activities or experience carried out together. Person-object theory of interest explains that environmental conditions will affect the development of interest in a person. The environment closest to student is the family, then the environmental condition that comes from family is socioeconomic status of the parents. The socioeconomic status of parents will trigger student interest in continuing their study to college. And previous research by Muhammad about the interest in continuing their children's education, the results found that the socioeconomic status of parents has a positive and significant influence on the interest in continuing their children's education. It can be interpreted that continuing children's education, socioeconomic status is one of the considerations. In this study, socioeconomic status was examined from income level, education level, and type of residence. The level of income is one of the most influential factors in continuing children's education. And next, influence learning motivation on interest in continuing study to higher education. Person-object theory of interest from Cecil suggests that the development of interest is divided into two, namely situational interest and individual interest. Situational interest grows first and will develop into individual interest. Situational interest involves focus intention, persistent motivating researchers use learning motivation as situational interest because Learning motivation is marked by the situational interest that persists and persists will lead to individual interest so that long-lasting individual interest will grow. According to Sadiman, when students have high learning motivation, students always feel dissatisfied and think education is very important. So that the students have a desire to have a higher education and have interest in continuing their study to college. First research by Khadija aims to analyze the factors that influence student interest in continuing higher education. The result of the study proves that there is a positive and significant influence of motivation on interest in continuing higher education. The research also proves that motivation has a very high influence. The meaning of the result of the study is that the higher the motivation of students or the stronger the motivation of students. The interest in continuing higher education will also be stronger. And next, influence per environment on learning, on interest in continuing study to higher education through learning motivation. The theory proposed by Setsufield et al., namely the person of the theory of interest, explains that individual interest will develop through situational interest triggered by the environment. Situational interest will grow because of the individual's interaction with the environment. Then situational interest will arise which will develop into individual interest. The growth of individual interest can be marked by the existence of individual interest and needs so that interest will be deep, lasting, and permanent. Sari and Widayati research examines the factors that influence learning motivation. The results show that the peer environment has positive and significant effect on learning motivation. The study explains that the condition of a conducive peer environment. Working together in learning, supporting each other will encourage student motivation in learning, so that the peer environment greatly affects student learning motivation. Then the result of account research proves the learning motivation in engineering has a positive and significant correlation with interest in engineering. That is, the higher the student motivation to learn, the higher the interest of students in continuing their studies to college. And next, influence from socioeconomic status on interest in continuing study to higher education through learning motivation. In accordance with the explanation of the person's object theory of interest proposed by Setsufield, individual interest will develop through situational interest triggered by the environment. In addition to the peer environment, the socioeconomic status of parents is also a stimulus that come from the environment to trigger individual interest through situational interest. Some talks suggest that students who are in socioeconomic status will affect their psychological development. And previous research by Muxon aims to determine the effect of parent socioeconomic status on learning motivation. The results of this study indicate that the socioeconomic status of parents has a positive and significant effect on learning motivation. It can be interpreted the socioeconomic status will affect student learning motivation. Then Agustina and Afriana research show that learning motivation has a positive and significant effect on student interest in continuing their education to college. This study explains that learning motivation is an impetus for students to improve their self-quality and abilities through higher education. And next, hypothesis study. Hypothesis 1 is peer environment has a positive and significant direct effect on interest in continuing study to higher education. And hypothesis 2, a parent's socioeconomic status has a positive and significant direct effect on interest in continuing study to higher education. And hypothesis 3, if learning motivation has a direct and positive effect on interest in continuing study to higher education. And hypothesis 4, peer environment has a positive and significant indirect effect on interest in continuing study to higher education through learning motivation. And hypothesis 5 is parent socioeconomic status has positive and significant indirect effect on interest in continuing study to higher education through learning motivation. And next, research method. Research method is the place is a public SMA, SMK, and A in Cempaka Putih district, and research design is quantitative research method. The type of quantitative research method used is descriptive method with a survey approach, and population is class 12 student of public SMA, SMK, and A Negeri in Cempaka Putih district for the 2020-2021 academic year. And sample is the sampling technique used is simple random sampling with the formula of Isaac and Michel. The result of the calculation of 278 sample. And measuring scale, Likert scale with 5 choice which has a score of 1, 5 depending on the nature of the question statement. And data collection technique, primary data with questionnaire collection technique. And next, data analysis technique. First, I use descriptive analysis to describe the research results in the form of diagram, histogram, and graphs. And next, validity test, reliability test. And next, analysis prerequisite test is normality test, multicollinearity test, heterogeneity test. And then hypothesis testing is path analysis, F-test, t-test, test coefficient determination, and Sobel test. And next, this is diagram track study. And results and discussion. Characteristics of respondents. Based on the table above, it can be concluded that there are 60 students of SMA 77 Jakarta will become respondent in study with a percentage of 22%. Then SMA 30 Jakarta as many as 87 students with a percentage of 32. And then SMKN 39 Jakarta as many as 63 students with a percentage of 23. And the last MAN 3 Jakarta as many as 58 students with a percentage of 21%. Based on this result, this respondent is the study where predominantly are from SMN 30 Jakarta. And next, validity test results. The result of the validity test of interest in continuing study to higher education and learning motivation are declared valid because they have an current value above 0.119. And next, the results of the validity test, peer environment, and parent socioeconomic status are declared valid because they have an count value above 0.119. And next, reliability test results. The result of the instrument reliability test for each variable shows that the value of Cronbach's alpha above 0.70. It can be said that each instrument is a reliable variable, that it is the research instrument is used repeatedly to measure the same object. It will still produce the same or consistent data so that the research instrument has met the requirement to be used as data collection. And next, prerequisite test result analysis of model 1. The result of the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test found that the assumed peak value is above 0.05, which is 0.200. So it can be concluded that the data of this research on structural model 1 is normally disputed and the normality test has been fulfilled. And next is independent variable in structural model. One has a VIF value of 1.560. So it can be concluded that the structural model 1 does not occur multicollinearity between the independent variable and is declared to have passed the multilinearity test because it has VIF value above 0.10. And next, table that heteroscedasticity model structural 1. The result of the glacier test found that the peer environment variable has a significant value above 0.05, which is 0.783. Then the variable of parent socioeconomic status has a significant value above 0.05, which is 0.057. So it can be concluded the structural model 1 is free from heteroscedasticity symptoms. And next, prerequisite test result analysis of model 2. The result of the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test found that the assumed significant value is above 0.05, which is 0.051. So it can be concluded that the research data on structural model 2 is normally distributed and the normality test has been fulfilled. And next, the value of VIF on the peer environment variable is 9.418. Then the socioeconomic status variable of parents is 1.649, and the last variable is learning motivation of 9.949. So it can be concluded that the structural model 2 does not occur multicollinearity between the independent variable and is declared to have passed the multilinearity test because it has a VIF value above 0.10. And next, table test heteroscedasticity model structural 2. The result of the glacier test found that the peer environment variable has a significant value above 0.05, which is 0.442. Then the variable of parent socioeconomic status has a significant value above 0.05, which is 0.096. That the last variable of learning motivation has a value of significant above 0.05, which is 0.70. So it can be concluded the structural model 2 is free from heteroscedasticity symptoms. And next, this is hypothesis. Result. Result analysis regression model structural 1, result analysis regression model structural 2, and Sobel test result. And next, result coefficient track study. And this is hypothesis test result. Hypothesis 1, have direct influence is 0.579 and significant 0.000, and hypothesis reserve. And hypothesis 2, have direct influence is minus 0.058 and significant is 0.05045, and hypothesis is reject. And hypothesis 3, have direct influence 0.417 and significant is 7.000, and hypothesis is reserved. And hypothesis 4, have indirect influence is 0.3707 and significant is 0.000, and hypothesis is reserved. And hypothesis 5, have indirect influence is 0.0396 and significant is 0.000, and hypothesis is reserved. And next, closing. Conclusion. One, peer environment has positive and significant effect on interest in continuing study in higher education. This is evidenced by the results of the analysis, which saw that it has a coefficient value of 0.579 with a significant value above 0.05, which is 0.000. And next, the socioeconomic status of parents has a negative and significant effect on the interest in continuing study in higher education. This is evident from the result of the analysis, which saw that it has a coefficient value of minus 0.048 with a significant value above 0.05, which is 0.045. Three, learning motivation has a positive and significant effect of interest in continuing studies in higher education. This is evident from the result of the analysis, which show that it has a coefficient value of 0.417 with a significant value above 0.05, which is 0.000. And next, for the peer environment has an indirect influence of the interest in continuing study in higher education through learning motivation significantly with a statistic value above 1.96, which is 7.077. The coefficient value of the indirect influence of peer environment on interest in continuing study in higher education through learning motivation is 0.3707. And 5, the socioeconomic status of parents has an indirect influence on the interest in continuing study in higher education through learning motivation significantly with a statistic value above 1.96, which is 3.435. The coefficient value of the indirect influence of the peer environment on interest in continuing studies in higher education through learning motivation is 0.0396. As suggestion, the student should realize that higher education is very important for their future. Having a high educational background is needed to support their careers in the current era. That it is expected for parents to be more aware of the peer environment of their children and provide high learning support and attention to their children so that they have high motivation in learning and are delighted in continuing their education. So this is presentation for me. Sorry if there are any wrong words during the presentation. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.